They called me a madman for claiming the sun once spoke to me. They burned my books, shattered my instruments, and banished me from the capital. But last night, when the eclipse swallowed the sky, the sun answered back. Not with light, but with a voice that said, "You left me behind, my beloved." My name is Aryan, former astronomer, exile, and apparently a forgotten god.
Welcome to another Bliss Tales video. Subscribe to my channel to keep these beautiful tales alive. New info, we have memberships and supers now where you can thank me and suggest new video ideas. Thanks for your support.
The mountain doesn't forgive. It doesn't forget either. I've lived here for 3 years now, alone except for the wind and the stars that mock me every night. They know the truth. They've always known, but they don't speak to mortals, only to those brave enough or foolish enough to listen. I was once the royal astronomer of Aldevaris, the greatest kingdom the world had ever known. I charted the heavens for kings. I predicted eclipses, mapped constellations, named the wandering planets after forgotten gods. My work was praised. My name was golden. Until the day I claimed that the sun itself was alive. That it watched us, that it felt. They laughed at first, then they grew afraid. Fear turns to anger quickly in the hearts of small men. I told them the sun had consciousness, that every flicker, every flare, every beam of light was intentional. I showed them calculations, patterns that couldn't be explained by nature alone. I showed them sigils hidden in solar cycles, symbols of a language older than stone, written in fire across the face of the burning sky. They called it heresy. They called me dangerous. And when I wouldn't recant, they took everything. My position, my home, my research. They hauled my books into the courtyard and set them aflame while I watched from chains. The smoke rose like prayers I'd never spoken, curling toward a sun that watched in silence. I remember the head priest standing before me, his face twisted with righteous fury. "You speak of the sun as if it were a lover," he spat. "As if the divine could be reduced to such base mortal emotion. Love is not base," I told him. "Love is the only thing that makes us worthy of the light." They struck me for that, split my lip. The blood tasted like copper and defeat. Then they dragged me to the edge of the kingdom and threw me into the wilderness with nothing but the clothes on my back and a broken telescope I'd hidden in my coat. The brass was dented, the lenses cracked, but it was mine. It was all I had left. "Let the sun speak to you now," they said, their laughter echoing as they rode away. And I thought that would be the end. But the sun is patient, and the sun remembers. I built my exile into a kind of life, a small cabin of stone and salvaged wood, a garden that barely grew in the thin mountain air. My days were spent repairing my telescope, my nights spent watching the stars. Waiting, always waiting, for what, I didn't know. The villagers in the valley below knew of me, the hermit astronomer on the mountain. Some thought me cursed, others thought me holy. Children would dare each other to climb halfway up the path and leave offerings. Bread, candles, sometimes flowers. I never saw them do it, but I'd find the gifts in the morning, lined up like prayers on my doorstep. I never took the food. I left it for the mountain foxes and the birds. But the candles, those I kept. I'd light them at night and watch the flames dance, imagining they were small suns, reaching out to their greater kin in the sky. I was lonely. I won't pretend otherwise. Loneliness becomes a companion of its own after enough time. It sits with you at meals. It whispers to you in the dark. It asks questions you can't answer. Why do you keep watching? Why do you keep believing? What are you waiting for? I didn't have answers. I only had faith. Not the kind they preached in temples, but something rawer, more desperate. The faith of a man who had touched something true and couldn't forget it, no matter how many years passed, no matter how much the world told him he was wrong. The eclipse began 3 nights ago. Not the kind we see every few decades. Those gentle passings where the moon briefly steals the spotlight. No, this one came without warning. No alignment, no celestial schedule. The sky simply darkened. as if something vast had stepped between us and the light. I was in my garden when it happened. The temperature dropped so suddenly I could see my breath. The birds fell silent. Even the wind stopped, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I looked up. The sun was dying. Not eclipsed. Dying. I could see it. The way its light flickered and pulsed unevenly, like a heartbeat struggling to continue. The corona, usually a perfect halo of brilliance, was ragged. Broken. I ran for my telescope. My hands trembled as I set it up on the ridge. I adjusted the brass fittings with fingers made clumsy by cold and fear. I aligned the lenses, compensating for the cracks with practiced precision. And then I looked. There, in the center of the blackened sun, was a mark I'd never seen before. A sigil, burning gold against the void. A circle split by a crescent, with a single star in its heart. My breath caught. I knew this symbol, not from my studies, not from any text or scroll or ancient ruin. I knew it the way you know your own name, the way you know the sound of your own heartbeat. I recognized it from my dreams. Dreams I'd been having for years. Dreams of fire and crystal palaces. Dreams of a hand in mine, warm and strong. Dreams of a voice calling a name that wasn't Aryan. Lyrian. Then the voice came. Not through the air. Not through sound. It moved through my bones, through the marrow, through the very blood that kept me alive. Lyrian. I fell. My knees struck stone. The telescope toppled beside me, forgotten. Lyrian. Do you still remember me? The world around me ignited. Golden light poured from the sky, from the ground, from my own skin. I tried to scream, but no sound came. The air burned. My vision split. I saw the mountain, but I also saw something else. Somewhere else. Somewhere made of clouds and fire and endless light. I saw myself standing on a platform of crystal that floated in an infinite sky. I wore robes of twilight, deep violet edged in silver that moved like liquid shadow. My hair was longer, flowing past my shoulders. My eyes glowed like dying embers. And beside me stood a man dressed in gold. He was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, not because of symmetry or perfection, but because of presence. He was radiance given form. His hair was spun sunlight. His eyes were twin flames. His smile could have lit 1,000 worlds. His name rose in my throat like an old prayer, like something my soul had been screaming for centuries. Solen. The visions came in fragments. Shattered glass memories cutting their way back into my mind, each one sharp and brilliant and agonizing. I was not always Aryan. I was not always mortal. I was Lyrian, the god of twilight, the keeper of dusk and dawn. I held the boundary between light and dark, the threshold between day and night. I was the soft gradient where opposites met and became one. I was eternal. I was loved. And I loved. Solen, the god of the sun radiant. Fierce. Beautiful in a way that could blind you if you stared too long. We ruled the heavens together. We were balance. Where I brought softness, he brought fire. Where he burned, I cooled. Where I whispered, he blazed. We were not opposites. We were halves of the same whole. The other gods respected us. Some feared us. Together, we held the sky in place, kept the world turning, maintained the delicate dance between light and shadow that allowed life to flourish. But we were more than duty, more than divine responsibility. We were in love. I remember the first time he kissed me. We were standing in the hall of eternal dawn, where the light never fades. He had just returned from setting the sun over the mortal world, and his skin still glowed with residual heat. He cupped my face in his hands, and I could feel the warmth radiating from his palms. You are my balance, he said. My peace, my reason. And then he kissed me, and I tasted starlight and fire and eternity. We weren't supposed to feel this way. Gods weren't meant to love like this, completely, devotedly, as if nothing else in all of creation mattered. But we did, and we didn't care who knew. But the mortals below, the humans, they were tearing themselves apart. Endless wars, kingdoms rising and falling like tides, blood soaked into soil that should have grown wheat and flowers. Their prayers reached us in screams, in desperate pleas for salvation, for mercy, for just one moment of peace. And I couldn't bear it. The other gods didn't care. They sat in their celestial halls and debated philosophy while the world below burned. They said mortals were brief, fleeting, like moths that burn and fall. Why mourn them? Why intervene beyond the basic maintenance of natural law? They create their own suffering, Thera, goddess of wisdom, said during one council. We cannot save them from themselves. But we can try, I argued. We can teach them, show them another way. You cannot teach what they refuse to learn, she replied, her eyes cold and ancient. Mortals are chaos. It is their nature. But I didn't believe that, couldn't, because sometimes, late at night, I would descend to the mortal realm in disguise and walk among them. I saw mothers singing to their children. I saw farmers sharing their harvest with neighbors. I saw lovers holding hands under the stars, making promises they would fight to keep. I saw beauty, fragility, hope, and I wanted to understand it. I wanted to know what it meant to live with a beginning and an end, to love something you could lose, to make choices that mattered because time was running out. So I made a decision. I would give up my divinity. I would descend. I would become one of them. Solen didn't understand at first. I told him one evening as we watched the stars wheel overhead from our palace in the sky. He was tracing patterns on my hand with his thumb, a gesture so tender it made my heart ache. What are you saying? He asked, his voice carefully calm. I'm saying I need to go, to live among them, to understand what it means to be mortal. He pulled away. For how long? I don't know. A lifetime. Maybe more. Lyrian, you can't. I can. I've already made my choice. He stood, his form blazing brighter with emotion. You would leave me? Leave this? Leave us? I would try to understand the world we're meant to protect. How can we guide them if we don't know what it's like to walk in their shoes? To feel what they feel? You want to feel pain? His voice broke. You want to feel loss? Grief? Death? Yes, I said quietly. I want to feel all of it, because they do. And if I'm going to help them, I need to know why they fight so hard to survive. Why they love so desperately when they know it will end. Solen fell to his knees in the Hall of Stars, his light flickering like a candle in wind. He gripped my hands so tightly I thought he'd shatter my bones. You'll forget, he said. The mortal veil will take your memories. You'll forget the heavens. You'll forget your purpose. You'll forget me. I knelt with him, pressing my forehead to his. I won't. I could never forget you. What we have is stronger than any magic, any curse, any divine law. Promise me, he whispered. Promise me you'll come back. I promise. But even as I said the words, I felt the lie in them. Not intentional, but inevitable. Because deep down, I knew what would happen. The mortal veil was absolute. Once I descended, once I took on flesh and blood and time, everything I was would be locked away, buried, forgotten. And Solen knew it too. I could see it in his eyes, the understanding, the acceptance, the heartbreak. But he let me go anyway, because that's what love is. Letting go when you want to hold on. Respecting a choice even when it destroys you. I remember the moment I left. The other gods gathered to witness it. Some were curious, others disapproving. Thera looked at me with something like pity. Solen stood at the edge of the celestial platform, his face a mask of controlled anguish. The light around him pulsed in waves, the physical manifestation of his pain. I walked to him, took his face in my hands one last time. I love you, I said, across all of time, across all of creation. Nothing will change that. He kissed me, tasted like goodbye, like loss, like forever, and then I stepped off the edge and fell into mortality. For centuries I lived and died and lived again. A scholar in one life, a farmer in another, a musician, A soldier, a poet, a merchant, a beggar. Each life different, each memory buried deeper. In one life, I was a teacher who loved the sunset so much I would stop my lessons just to watch it. In another, I was a blacksmith who forged sun motifs into every piece I made. In another, I was a sailor who navigated by the stars but always felt drawn to the dawn. And Solen, he watched. He burned alone in the heavens, maintaining the sun's course across the sky, waiting for me to remember, waiting for me to come back. But I never did. In every life, something inside me was restless, searching. I would wake from dreams I couldn't quite remember, reaching for someone who wasn't there. I would feel an inexplicable sadness watching the sunrise, as if I were being reminded of something I'd lost. But the memories never came. The veil held. Until now, the visions stopped as suddenly as they'd begun. I was on the mountain again, gasping, my body soaked in sweat and light. The eclipse was fading. The sun was returning, but it was wrong. Dimmer, flickering like a dying candle struggling against the wind. And I understood. Solen was dying. Without me, the balance was broken. The celestial order that held the heavens in place was fracturing. The sun, his essence, his life force, his very being was fading. And when it finally went out, the world would freeze. The crops would wither. The seas would turn to ice. Humanity, the very people I'd chosen over him, would perish in the cold and dark. The only way to restore the balance was for me to return, to reclaim my divinity, to step back into the role I'd abandoned, to become Lyrian again. But doing so would erase Aryan, every memory I'd made as a mortal, every lesson I'd learned, every moment of joy and pain and love and loss, every sunrise I'd watched, every book I'd read, every person I'd cared for, gone, burned away in the fires of godhood. I would save the world, but I would lose myself, everything I'd worked for, everything I'd learned, all the understanding I'd gained about what it means to be human, to be fragile, to be temporary. It would vanish as if it had never been. I would become divine again, eternal, unchanging, and I would forget why I'd ever left in the first place. I didn't hesitate. I stood, my legs shaking, and looked up at the dying sun. "I'm coming," I whispered. "Wait for me, just a little longer." I gathered what little I needed. A water skin, my broken telescope wrapped in cloth, a worn journal where I'd recorded my observations and thoughts over the years of exile. I didn't know why I took it. Instinct, maybe, or hope. Then I began to climb. The celestial citadel sits at the peak of Mount Asara, where the earth touches the sky. It's a ruin now, shattered columns and cracked stone, vines growing through marble that once gleamed like captured starlight. The mortals forgot it long ago. Their history doesn't reach back far enough to remember when gods walked openly in the world. But the gods remember, and the citadel waits. The path was steep. My legs screamed with every step. My lungs burned in the thin air. I had to stop every few hundred feet just to breathe, leaning against rocks that still hummed with residual divine energy. As I climbed, more memories flooded back. I remembered bringing Solen to this very place when it was still whole, still magnificent. We would come here when we needed to be away from the other gods, away from our duties. We'd lie on the marble floors and watch the stars whirl overhead, talking about everything and nothing. "What do you think mortals dream about?" I'd asked him once. "The same things we do," he'd replied. "Love, purpose, meaning. The only difference is they have less time to find it. Maybe that makes it more precious." He turned to look at me, his golden eyes searching my face. "Is that why you want to go? To find out if scarcity makes things more valuable?" "Maybe," I'd admitted. "Or maybe I just want to know what it's like to be truly afraid of losing something." He'd pulled me closer then, his arms wrapping around me. "I already know what that feels like, because I'm afraid of losing you." I kissed him then, trying to pour every reassurance into that touch, trying to promise something I wouldn't be able to keep. The memory faded as I reached a particularly treacherous section of the path. Loose stones skittered away under my feet. I pressed myself against the mountainside, inching along, trying not to look down at the dizzying drop below. My mortal body was so weak, so limited. As Lyrian, I could have simply flown to the summit. But as Aryan, I had to climb, had to fight for every step, had to earn the destination. And somehow that felt right. Took me 2 days to reach the summit. I had to sleep on narrow ledges, wrapping myself in my cloak against the bitter cold. I rationed my water, ignored my hunger, kept climbing. On the second night I dreamed. I was Lyrian again, standing in the Hall of Stars. But something was wrong. The light was dim, flickering, and Solen was sitting on the floor, his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. I ran to him. What's wrong? What happened? He looked up at me, and his eyes were hollow, empty. You're not real, he said. You're just another dream, another cruel reminder of what I lost. I'm here, I insisted, reaching for him. I'm right here, but my hand passed through him like smoke. You chose them over me, he said, his voice breaking. You chose mortality over us, over everything we built, everything we were. I chose understanding, I said desperately. I chose to learn what it means to love something temporary, so that when I came back to you I would truly understand what we have, what we are. But you didn't come back, he whispered. You forgot, and I've been alone for so long, so unbearably long. I tried to speak, but the dream shattered. I woke with tears on my face and the sunrise painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, colors that reminded me of him. I kept climbing. At the summit, the air shimmered with heat, and there, suspended in the center of the broken temple, was a sphere of fire. Pulsed weakly, like a heartbeat struggling to continue. Cracks ran through it like fractures in glass, and through those cracks, I could see light bleeding away into nothing. Inside it, I saw him, Solen. He was half-formed, half-light, half-shadow. His body flickered between solid and translucent. His golden hair drifted like smoke. His eyes, those eyes that once held the fury and joy of 1,000 suns, were dull, fading. But when he saw me, they brightened. Just a little, just enough. You came, he whispered. His voice was a ghost of what it had been. Weak, strained. Every word seemed to cost him. I stepped closer. The heat should have killed me, should have turned me to ash before I made it 3 steps. But it didn't. It welcomed me, recognized me. Of course I came, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I promised, didn't I? A bitter laugh escaped him. You promised you wouldn't forget. You promised you'd come back. I know. Do you? The fire around him flared weakly. Do you know what it's been like? Watching you live and die over and over, never remembering, never even looking up at the sky and recognizing me? Solen, you left me, he said, and now there was anger beneath the pain. You chose them over me. You chose to forget everything we had, everything we were, for the chance to experience what it's like to be weak, temporary, breakable. Yes, I said simply. I did. The honesty of it seemed to surprise him. The anger flickered, uncertain. I took another step closer. I chose to understand what it means to love something you can lose, to care for something fragile, to know that every moment matters because there's an ending. And was it worth it? His form flickered. The sphere around him shrank another inch. Was it worth this? Worth destroying us? Worth dying alone? I looked at him, really looked at him, at the God I had loved for eons, the being who had waited centuries for me to remember, who had burned alone while I lived and loved and forgot, who had kept the sun rising every single day, even when it hurt, even when he wanted to let it all burn out, because he'd made a promise to protect the world I'd chosen. Yes, I said quietly, because now I know what I'm choosing when I choose you. His eyes widened. When I left, I loved you as a God loves. eternal, unchanging, perfect and distant and forever. I stepped closer, close enough now that the heat made my skin prickle. But now I've loved as a mortal loves, desperately, completely, with the knowledge that it could end at any moment. And I'm choosing you with all of that knowledge, with all of that understanding. Lyrian, I'm not reclaiming godhood, Solen. I reached out, my hand stopping just short of the sphere. I'm giving you something better. What? I smiled through my tears. Mortality. His eyes went wide with shock. No, you can't. The balance. The balance was broken the moment I left. We've been trying to maintain something that was never meant to last forever. But maybe that's the point. I pressed my palm against the sphere. It burned, but I didn't pull away. Maybe love isn't meant to be eternal. Maybe it's meant to be now. This moment. This choice. Made over and over, for as long as we have. The world will find a new balance. The sun will rise because the earth turns, not because a god commands it. Humanity will survive because they always do. They're stronger than we ever gave them credit for. I looked into his eyes. But you and I? We get to be free. We get to choose each other without duty or destiny or divine mandate. Just us. I'll forget, he whispered. I'll forget you. Everything we were. No, I said firmly. We'll forget the details, the eons, the divine power. But this, I pressed my hand harder against the barrier between us. This we'll remember, the part that matters, the love. It'll come back. I promise. You promised before. I know. And I was right. I did come back. I always come back to you. Even when I don't remember why. Even when I don't know your name. Something in me always reaches for the sun. Tears of pure light ran down his face. I've been so alone. I know. I'm so sorry. But you don't have to be alone anymore. Come with me. Fall with me. And we'll find each other again. As mortals. As equals. As two people choosing each other because we want to, not because the universe demands it. For a long moment he was silent. The sphere pulsed erratically. The cracks widened. Then slowly he smiled. That beautiful, radiant smile I remembered from eons ago. Together? He asked. Together, I promised. He reached out from within the sphere. His hand, translucent and flickering, pressed against mine through the barrier. I love you, he said. I have loved you for eternities. And I will love you for whatever time we have left. I love you too, I whispered. Now let go. The sphere exploded. Light filled the world. Poured through me, through him, through the very fabric of the sky. It wasn't destructive, it was transformative. I felt my divine essence unraveling, bleeding away into the atmosphere. I felt Solen's power dispersing, returning to the world it had come from. The eclipse shattered. The sun blazed, not with the cold, perfect light of divinity, but with something warmer, something natural, the light of a star burning in space, following the laws of physics rather than the will of a god. And in that light we fell, together, not down but through layers of reality, through the veil between divine and mortal, through time itself. I felt everything slipping away, my memories as Lyrian, my power, my eternal perspective. It all bled out of me like water through open fingers. But I held on to one thing, one truth that I clutched with everything I had left. I love him. I will always love him. No matter what name I wear or what life I live. I will find him again. And then everything went dark. I woke to the sound of waves. The air smelled of salt and fish and wet wood. Seagulls cried overhead. My body ached. A deep, bone-tired ache that felt strangely comforting. Real. I opened my eyes. I was lying in a small bed in a small room. Sunlight streamed through a window. Real sunlight. Warm and golden and alive, but not conscious. Just light. Just physics. I sat up slowly. My hands, my human hands, were calloused. Paint stained my fingers in blues and golds and purples. An easel stood in the corner, a half-finished canvas propped on it. A seascape, the sun rising over water, rays of light breaking through clouds. I didn't remember painting it, but I knew I had, and I knew why. Something about the sunrise called to me, always had, for as long as I could remember. It made me feel less alone. My name is Aryan. I'm a painter. I live in a seaside village called Merrill's Bay. I've lived here my whole life, in this small room above a bakery, painting pictures I sell to travelers and tourists. And yet, I remembered fire. I remembered falling. I remembered a hand in mine, warm and strong, pulling me through light. I remembered a voice saying my name like a prayer. Not Aryan. Something else. Something older. The memory was already fading. I tried to hold on to it, but it slipped away like morning mist. Soon all that was left was a feeling, a sense of longing, a certainty that I was supposed to be looking for something, or someone. I dressed quickly and stepped outside. The village was waking. Fishermen hauled nets full of silver fish onto the docks. Children chased each other through narrow cobblestone streets, laughing. A baker, old Maris, who owned the shop below my room, shouted about fresh bread and honey cakes. It was ordinary, beautiful in its ordinariness. And down by the pier, a ship was docking. I don't know why I walked toward it. I had no reason to. No deliveries expected, no friends arriving. I just felt pulled. The same way I felt pulled to paint sunrises. The same way I felt pulled to stare at the sky sometimes, searching for something I couldn't name. The gangplank lowered. Passengers disembarked. Merchants with goods from distant ports. Travelers looking for a quiet place to rest. Families reuniting. And then I saw him. He stood at the edge of the ship, one hand gripping the railing. He wore simple clothes, a white shirt that was probably expensive once but was now worn from travel, brown trousers, boots scuffed and dusty. His hair was golden, catching the morning sunlight in a way that made it seem to glow. His eyes scanned the crowd. And then they found me. He froze. I froze. We stared at each other across the distance of the pier, and everything else faded away. The noise of the crowd, the cry of the gulls, the splash of waves against the dock. In that instant, that impossible, perfect instant, something clicked into place. Like a puzzle piece I didn't know was missing. Like a word I'd been searching for my entire life. I didn't know his name. I didn't know where he'd come from or why he was here. But I knew him. My soul knew him. He stepped off the ship slowly, never taking his eyes off me. I walked toward him, my feet moving of their own accord. We met in the middle of the pier, surrounded by people who didn't notice, didn't care, didn't realize they were witnessing something impossible. Up close, he was even more striking. His eyes were amber, flecked with gold. His face had laugh lines at the corners of his eyes, and a small scar on his chin. He looked like he'd traveled a long way. He looked exhausted. He looked like coming home. He started, then stopped. His voice was rough, uncertain. I had the strangest dream. So did I heard myself say, about fire, and light, and falling. He paused, his eyes searching mine. And you. I dreamed about you. My heart was racing. What's your name? Solen, he said. Then he laughed, soft and wondering and a little bit broken. I don't know why, but saying that out loud feels right. Like remembering something I'd forgotten. Solen? I repeated, and the name tasted like honey on my tongue, like sunlight, like home. My name's Eryan. Aryan, he whispered, and I watched his eyes widen. I've been looking for you. Have you? I think so. I've been traveling for months. Couldn't tell you why. Every time I tried to settle somewhere, something inside me said keep going, keep searching. So I did. And now, he reached out, hesitant, and touched my hand. Just his fingertips against mine. Now I'm here, and I don't understand it, but I feel like I've finally found what I was looking for. I turned my hand over, letting our palms touch. His skin was warm. I paint sunrises. I said, not knowing why I was telling him this. Every morning. I can't help it. Something about the way the light breaks through the dark. It makes me feel less alone. His breath caught. I used to hate sunrises. They reminded me of something I'd lost. But lately I've started watching them again. And I'd imagine someone watching with me. Someone who understood. We stood there, hands touching, staring at each other like we were trying to solve a mystery written in each other's eyes. This is crazy, he said. I don't know you. I just met you. I know. But I feel like I've known you forever. Me too. He smiled then, and it was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. Would you want to get breakfast? I'd really like to know you. The you that exists right now in this moment. I smiled back. I'd like that. We walked toward Maris's bakery, hands still touching, neither of us willing to break the contact. Around us, the village continued its morning routine. Fishermen unloaded their catch. Children played. Merchants set up their stalls. And two men who had once been gods walked side by side, mortal and temporary and perfectly, beautifully human. We didn't speak of destiny or past lives or cosmic balance. We spoke of simple things. He told me about his travels, the cities he'd seen, the people he'd met. I told him about my paintings, about the way the light changes over the water, about how sometimes I wake up reaching for something I can't name. And with every word, every shared smile, every moment our shoulders brushed as we walked, I felt something settling into place. Not a memory. Something deeper, a recognition that went beyond thought or recollection. We bought honey cakes from Maris, who gave us a knowing smile that suggested she saw something we didn't yet understand. We sat on the seawall, eating and watching the sun climb higher in the sky. I feel like I've been waiting my whole life for this, Solen said quietly. For what? For you. For this moment. For the feeling of finally being exactly where I'm supposed to be. I looked at him, really looked at him, at the way the morning light caught in his hair, at the peaceful expression on his face, at the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. Me too, I whispered. For the first time in centuries, in lifetimes, love wasn't cosmic. It wasn't cursed. It wasn't divine or fated or written in the stars. It was simply human. A choice, a moment, two people finding each other and deciding that this right here, right now was worth everything. And that made it perfect. Far above, on a cliff overlooking the bay, two figures stood in shadow. One was draped in robes of silver light, his face hidden behind a veil that shimmered like moonlight on water. The other was crowned in storm clouds, lightning flickering in his dark eyes. His expression thunderous and beautiful and terrible all at once. They found each other again, the veiled one murmured. His voice was soft as moonlight, gentle and sad. Nyx was what the ancient scrolls called him. The moon guardian, keeper of secrets and dreams. The storm god, Strum, smirked, but there was no joy in it. Fate has always favored them. And us. Nyx's voice was barely a whisper. Strom's expression darkened. Thunder rumbled in the distance, echoing his anger, his pain. Fate forgot us long ago. Perhaps. Nyx turned to look at him, and even through the veil, Strom could feel the weight of that gaze. Perhaps we should remind it. Lightning flashed, the wind howled, and when the light faded, they were gone. But their story was just beginning. Love is strange, isn't it? We spend our lives searching for something eternal, something that lasts. We want promises of forever. We want guarantees. We want to know that what we feel, what we choose, will matter beyond this moment. But maybe the most powerful love isn't the kind that survives forever. Maybe it's the kind that chooses to be fragile, that chooses to risk everything, that says, I would rather have you for a moment than have eternity alone. Aryan and Solen were gods. They could have ruled the heavens forever. They could have been eternal, unchanging, perfect. But they chose something better. They chose each other. They chose to be human, to live, to love, to end. And in that choice, they became more than gods. They became real. This is the story of the prince who forgot he was a god. But it's also the story of the god who remembered what it means to be human. It's about sacrifice and choice and the understanding that sometimes losing everything is the only way to gain what truly matters. It's about two souls who loved each other so much that they were willing to be mortal together, to be vulnerable together, to face an ending together. Because forever is easy when you're eternal. But choosing to love when time is limited, when every moment could be the last, when loss is inevitable, that's the bravest thing of all. But their tale is only one thread in a tapestry far larger than any of us can see. The moon guardian and the storm god watched them fall, watched them find each other again in mortality. And now, as the old divine order crumbles, as the balance shifts and changes, their own story begins to stir. A story of two beings who were forgotten by fate itself, who loved in the shadows while others burned bright in the light. Some loves are written in starlight. Others are carved in thunder and whispered in the quiet spaces between storms. And some loves are both. Thank you for listening. If the story touched you, if it made you feel something, wonder, longing, hope, or the beautiful ache of knowing that all things end, then it did what it was meant to do. Stories like this remind us that love, in all its forms, is worth the risk, worth the fall, worth the choice to be vulnerable, worth everything we have to give, until the storm calls again, and the moon reveals its secrets, until two forgotten gods remember why they were willing to defy heaven itself. Their story is waiting.
If you loved this video, show me some support by subscribing and clicking the notification bell.